Well, hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me for today's devotion. We've come to the end of another week. We are in Joshua 7. And while you're opening your Bible there, if you haven't done so already, I want to just really urge you to make sure you're in worship this Sunday. Remember, as always, our services here at First Baptist, contemporary service at 8:30 and 11, with our traditional service in the middle at 9:45. If you're out of town, you can watch our live stream on the website under the members tab. You'll see a place for live stream. And also, if you're somewhere else, go to church in the town you're on vacation this weekend, but be in God's house with God's people worshiping God this Sunday. All right. Yesterday, we talked about the destruction, the conquest of Jericho. And you'll remember that God had put everything under a ban, which meant everything was to be destroyed except some of the precious metals, gold and silver and things like that. And they were to be placed in the treasury of the Lord. But the individual Israelis, the Jewish people, none of them were supposed to take anything. Well, in chapter 7, Joshua sends a small contingent of his army to do battle with a small town called Ai, and unexpectedly they are defeated. God tells Joshua the reason was, look at verse 1 of chapter 7. Verse 1 of chapter 7, but the sons of Israel acted unfaithfully in regard to the things under the ban. For Achan, the son of Carmi, and he goes through his lineage at the end of verse 1, took some of the things under the ban, therefore the anger of the Lord burned against the sons of Israel. Now, I want you to notice, one man took stuff that God said no one was to take. He saw it. We learned later in the chapter that he saw it and he lusted for it, and so he took it. And yet God says it's the sons of Israel who acted unfaithfully, and they lose the battle. Now later, Achan and his family and possessions are destroyed, executed for this sin, and then they would go on to defeat Ai in chapter 8, which we'll look at on Monday. Now, you and I here in America and in the West tend to think in terms of the individual, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is a great thing, but we have to be careful because we sometimes overemphasize individualism. And it seems strange, odd to us to think about corporate responsibility, about community, because the idea that one man's sin would move God to allow the entire Jewish army to be defeated just seems weird to us. Again, because we have a hyper focus on individualism. In the Bible, there is a focus on individualism, but also on community, on corporate responsibility. And what one person does affects the whole, and what the whole does affects one person, for good or bad. That's one of the most important lessons from this chapter you and I need to learn. You see it displayed so many ways in the Bible. For instance, God telling us that he visits the sins of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. Maybe we would be wiser as a people if we thought in terms of corporate responsibility and community alongside individualism. Holding those two things together in balance, because both matter. A lesson for us is since God says, yes, you're responsible individually, but sometimes groups are blessed or groups suffer because of what one individual does. Since that is true, maybe as a reminder for you and me to hold up our end of the deal, to hold up our end of the responsibility, to do our part, because whether or not we do our part can either bless or hinder the groups that we are part of. A second takeaway is maybe we need to be very wise in choosing which groups we belong to. Because if we can be blessed or hurt by the groups that we belong to, even if we're not the ones doing anything wrong, but what they do can hurt us, maybe we need to be careful which groups we belong to. Choose wisely the groups to which you belong. And then when you do belong to a group, hold up your end of the deal. It's just a biblical principle. Think about the church. What this church does impacts you. But biblically, what you do also impacts the church. And God holds you responsible for the impact you're having on this church. So do well. Do well. And one good thing you can do is be in God's house to worship Him this Sunday. Attend a life group and fellowship with God's people and study His Word. Invite someone to come with you and be a blessing to your church. God bless you. Look forward to seeing you Sunday in worship, and then next Monday as we continue our devotion by looking at the next chapter, chapter 8 of the book of Joshua.